Welcome to my Divine Kayle guide. This is one of the hardest comps to play in the game right now, as it requires you to be flexible with your synergies and the champions you use. So it's one of the best comps to play right now if you want to improve. So in this video, I will be going over the build and all of its different variations, what items you make, how to play the early, mid, and late game, and then we finish off going over in-depth positioning. The only core unit in this comp is Kayle, but I find myself playing her with these 4 units quite often. Here we got 2 Divine and 2 Executioner, which is all Kayle really needs. The other 3 units are based on what you hit, but a strong level 8 board that doesn't require any Chosens is this one. Here we got a 3 Adept frontline with 4 Divine. Kayle is our main carry, but Lee Sin and Yone can also work as secondary carries. The best 2 Chosens you can get are Divine and Executioner Chosen. With Divine, you take out Jax for Morgana if you need more utility, or Saya if you need more damage. With Executioner Chosen, you always want to have 4 Executioner in. This is because our damage output is doubled from the start of the fight. Since we have so much damage, we take out Jax and Lee Sin for Azir and Saya to get more frontline and utility. I also want to quickly note that you never want to go for 6 Divine unless you have a Chosen or a Spatula, and even then it's sometimes better to just put in other units. Same thing with 3 Executioner, only 2 is necessary. 3 Executioner is not that great unless you easily can fit it. Some other good Chosens to go for are any Adept Chosen, Mystic Shen or Zillion, Keeper Xayah or Azir, Siphoner Morgana or Swain. At level 9, you will add in another unit to either counter the enemy teams or to round out your own comp. This is often any legendary, Saya, or Morgana, depending on what you need, but more about that in the late game part of the video. Kayle is our primary carry in this build, so we prioritize making items for her first. She needs 2 damage items and 1 defensive item. The only core item for Kayle is either RFC or Rage Blade. Both of these are great, and if you get both, it's an amazing combination. RFC is great as you can corner Kayle and she never has to move. This makes her always get the attack speed buff from Yuumi as well. Rageblade is great with Kayle as she already has a really high base attack speed, so it scales way better with her than any other champions. The reason why both are not mentioned as the 2 core items is that the Kayle comp is more about slamming items to save HP so that you can fast 8. As the comp relies around getting a lot of forecasts and legendaries. In addition, you need 3 bows to get both RFC and Guinsoo's, which can be hard in some games. So in other words, you just need one of these to do fine, but if you really want to make the best in-slot items for Kayle, they are RFC, Rageblade, and QSS. Some other good damage items to put on Kayle are Morello, Deathcap, Hajj, and Jewel Gauntlet. There are 4 defensive items you can put on her as well, and they are QSS, Trapclaw, GA, and Gunblade. The best one is QSS in most cases, but in some lobbies, Trapclaw or GA is much better. So if you want to learn more about how you can optimize your itemization skills, check out my item guide where I go in depth on the subject. Some other items that are great for this comp are Chalice and Zeke's, also known as Aura items. These want to go on Kindred or Xayah as you will place them next to Kayle in most cases. Besides that, you want to put your frontline items on Irelia and Shen. If you keep getting a bunch of damage items, the spare ones want to go on Kindred, Saya, or Yone. And if you're running Lee Sin or Yone late game, Blue Buff and Frozen Heart are amazing on them. If you get a Spatula, the best thing you can make is Duelist Spat. That's because this synergy is just a better Rage Blade for Kayle, and getting this item is often just enough to win the game as it's that broken on her. Another great one to make is Divine Spat. This allows you to more easily fit in 4 Divine, or even go for 6 Divine if you need more damage. So to sum up, if you can make a good item, then slam it, just make sure to have either RFC or Rageblade for the late game. The carousel priority for this comp is bow, rod, glove, then chain. I've made an early game guide where I go more in depth on how to play the early game, but I will cover it here specifically for Kayle. Since Kayle revolves mostly around 4 and 3 cost units, we can pretty much play any opener we want to in the early game. And some of those openers are 2 Assassin with Diana as your carry. Frontline can be anything, meaning Brawlers, Keepers, Vanguards, Divine, or even 3 Cultist in this case. 2 Sharpshooters with Teemo as the carry. Here the frontline can be anything as well. 3 Warlords with Nidalee as the carry. You can take out Rakan for 2 Sharpshooters or 2 Vanguards. cultist keepers with TF as the main carry. Once you have found your comp, we need to make items. As a general rule, you want to make an item if you have 4 or more components. Some items that are really good to slam that also transition well into Kayle are Chalice, Rageblade, Hajj, Ionic Spark, Locket, Deathcap, Sunfire, and Zeke's Herald. You also want to avoid slamming items like RFC, GA, QSS, and Trapclaw in the early game, as they don't really do anything at that stage. These are more late game items. In the early game, I really like pre-leveling to 4 on 1/4 if I haven't gotten a Chosen yet. Just because getting a 2-cost Chosen makes your board so much stronger. Another thing to note is that you usually never want to play for a full loss streak with this comp, as you will have to roll at level 6 to stabilize, and it's very hard to hit Kayle that early. Therefore, I try to play strongest board regardless of my opener, and try to save as much HP so I can hopefully be strong enough to fast 8 instead of having to roll at 7. At the Krugs round, you should have more direction towards a comp. The general requirements to play Kayle is to have at least one component for RFC or Rageblade, plus another Kayle or Aura item. The units we have don't matter, as we're finding most of our core units for this comp at level 7 and 8. In the mid game, you always want to hold Kayle if you're not playing her, and you prefer to hold Shen, Irelia, and Kindred as well, but do not lose eco over holding those. Like I briefly mentioned earlier, if you're very weak, typically around 70 to 60 HP and loss streaking, then you want to level to 6 on 3-2 and roll down to stabilize. The amount of gold you roll down will depend on how weak you are, but you prefer to not drop below 30 gold as you still need the money to go level 7 and 8. Some good mid-game boards to stabilize with that also transition well into Kayle are Akali carry with 2 or 4 assassin, works with any frontline. Kindred carry, even though we need Kindred for the late game, it's still worth using her as the item carrier if we don't have a better option. The frontline here can be anything. Shyvana with brawlers or dragon souls, and Kalista with cultists and keepers. During the mid game, you want to scout the other players and look at what items they have, what units and synergies they have, how they are positioned, as well as what comp they're going. This is crucial information to gather as we can optimize our itemization for Kayle. If there are a lot of assassin players, then GA will be the best defensive item. And if there are a lot of comps that heal up like Zed, Olaf, and Siphoner Nasus, then Sunfire Cape or Morello will be a great option. Kayle can support 2 to 3 players at max, so if you see more than that going for it, consider pivoting to another comp like Elderwood Aesol or Slayer Olaf. At stage 4-1, you want to be level 7. Here you have 2 options. You either save your gold and do a fast 8, meaning you look to go level 8 and roll down on either 4-5 or 5-1. If you want to do this, you need to be 70 plus HP while also having at least 50 gold or more after leveling to 7. The big risk with fast 8ing is that a lot of reroll comps hit their 3 stars at 4-1, and all the other players that didn't have a strong mid game will roll here as well. So if you make a bad judgment call and decide to fast 8, then you might end up taking 40 damage in 3 turns, and then you will be forced to roll down on 4-5. In some cases, you won't have the gold to hit everything, and then you will have to donkey roll for the rest of the game in order to not bleed out. So be very careful and scout the lobby before doing a fast 8. If you decide to roll at level 7, the amount of gold you roll down with will depend here. Sometimes if I've had a strong mid game and I'm very healthy, I will often just roll down 10 to 20 to 30 gold just to hit a couple more 2-star units, and then look to go level 8 on 5-1. This way we get less gold to roll down with at level 8, but since we managed to save more of our HP, we have more time to roll, and we might not even need to roll down that much on level 8 anyways. But if you had a weak mid game and you need to roll down more, that's fine, just try not to go below 10 gold if possible. But in some cases, if you completely miss your roll down, then you might have to donkey roll in order to not go 8th. At level 7, it is very hard to get a 2-star Kayle, so a lot of the time I will stabilize with a 2-star Kindred or Shyvana to be a strong secondary carry to Kayle. It is also important to hit your lower cost frontliners 2-star like Jax and Irelia here. Once you hit your comp at level 8, You would need to decide whether or not you can go to level 9 this game. This will require you to have at least everything except your legendaries to start, and you need to be healthy enough to sit while also having moderately strong items. But this comp really loves to fit in as many units as possible, so there is a huge payoff to going level 9. This is also why playing aggressive to save HP is recommended whenever possible. At level 9, you add in another unit to either round out your comp or to counter the enemy teams. So some of the better options are Saya for 3 Executioner and more damage, Morgana for utility in case you need to lower the AD of the enemy teams. She also gets Enlightened with Irelia and gives Siphoner if you're running Nasus or Swain. Sejuani and Aatrox are great to put in as well if the enemy carries don't have QSS. Azir if you need more frontline / utility. His Sand Soldiers are also amazing to counter assassins and to force them to not attack your main carry at first. Lee Sin is amazing to deal with large enemy threats if you're good at scouting. He can single-handedly win you fights if you position him correctly. Ornn is great to run when you are strong compared to everyone else. Just playing him for one cycle to get the item and then switching back to strongest board after that is usually the play. But never play Ornn when you are from behind because the unit itself is not that powerful because of the Blacksmith synergy. Set is good if you have subpar items for Kayle and need more damage. Swain is okay as a frontline unit. He's not worth to put in though unless you're running Nasus or Morgana already. Yone is great as he often gives you another adept, and the MR and Armor Shred can be really valuable to counter Elderwoods and Vanguard Mystics. You also want to replace Yuumi with Cillian once he is 2-starred. Another option is to stay level 8 and roll for Kayle 3-star. This will require you to be uncontested while also having 5 or more Kayles in total after the level 8 rolldown. But in general, going for 3-star Kayle is more of a 1st or 8th kind of play, and going level 9 to put in another unit is the more consistent, secure top 4 play. First, I will go over general positioning with this comp. Then I will go over some more in-depth examples. General positioning looks like this. Here we got Yone on one side to get the exile buff, and to not take too much aggro away from the Jax. Lee Sin is on the far right side. This is so he will kick a unit that is on the hex to the top right straight out of the map. Jax is on the outskirts of the team as he wants units to wrap around him, so he stuns more of them. Shen and Irelia are between Jax and Lee Sin. Kayle is in the bottom corner to stay safe from AoE spells hitting the front line. She can also be in the second row cubby if there are a lot of assassins or if there is not much AoE spells in that area. This way she deals more damage as her waves reach farther into the enemy team. Kindred is usually next to Kayle to defend her from assassins if we get jumped. Yuumi is out in the middle to catch assassins that jump on the wrong side. One small note about Kayle and Yuumi: if you have RFC on Kayle, always corner her if possible. This way, Yuumi will almost always dash to her and give her the big attack speed boost. But for the in-depth examples coming, I will assume you do not have RFC. So now moving on to some more in-depth examples. Against the first guy, the big threats are Tristana and Nautilus. Lee Sin is in the middle so that he kicks Nautilus out on the right side without getting intercepted by one of the backline units. Irelia, Shen, and Jax are in the middle to deal with Braum. Kayle is on the opposite side of Tristana, so she doesn't take damage from her till the end of the fight. Kindred is in the middle, so she doesn't steal the attack speed buff from Yuumi. Against the second guy, Lee Sin is far right, hoping that he kicks out the Sejuani. Jax is there to hopefully stun Sejuani before she ults. Kayle, Yuumi, and Kindred are left side to stay out of the Sejuani ult. Irelia and Shen are in the middle to deal with Swain and Darius after he walks up. Against the third guy, Lee Sin is positioned to kick off Tryndamere. Jax, Irelia, and Shen is in the middle to deal with the front line, and so that Tryndamere spins there instead of on our Kayle. Yuumi is in the middle to bait Katarina. Kindred is in the middle right to make Kayle dodge the pike stun. Against the fourth guy, the big threat is Neeko and Aatrox. It will be very hard to beat this matchup without QSS or Trapclaw, but here Kindred is getting Sephired, Yone is on the far right to get Exile buff and hopefully hit the Neeko with a spell. Lee Sin will kick Nautilus into Neeko to CC her. Jax is stunning Aatrox to delay our units from clumping up. Irelia is disarming Sejuani and Aatrox to delay the time it takes for them to ult. So in conclusion, the most important thing when playing this comp is to look at where Lee Sin is going to kick, who is Jax going to stun, and how to get Yuumi to buff the Kayle. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what video you want me to make next, and if you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. We got over 1,000 other players there who are hungry to climb. And if you want to get coached by me, the information is over on the Discord server as well. So take care and see you in the next video.